Words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Sam did a good job of reading that. He sounded like God, didn't he? Oh God, send down and tear open the skies. Come down so that the mountains might quake at your presence. Yes. This is the first Sunday in the season of Advent. You can say to your friends and to those that you meet during the next week, Blessed Advent to you. We're not ready to say Merry Christmas yet. Merry Christmas comes at Christmas. But if you are a Christian, you can say Blessed Advent to people. And I suggest you try that this week. Especially if they're Christians, they'll appreciate that. And they'll say, well, a Blessed Advent back to you. It reminds us that we're on a different schedule than the rest of the world. This year we have an extra Advent Sunday. Christmas falls on Sunday this year, so the Lord has blessed us in extra special ways. During the first part of the season of Advent, we remind ourselves that the prophets looked forward to the coming of the Messiah for hundreds of years prior to the coming of Jesus. And we read some of the more familiar prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah. We hear that the one who is coming will be called Emmanuel. El stands for God. Emmanuel means walking with us. God who will walk with us. Emmanuel. We sang about that this morning. We'll read about the one who is coming will be like a lamb who will lie down with the wild beasts. It will be one who is a shepherd, one who is peaceful. But in today's reading, the prophet Isaiah calls on God to come down with earthquake and fire and noise and show everybody who's God and what's what. We cry that too sometimes, don't we? We get frustrated with this lost world, with all the sin that is in it, all the violence, all of the ways that people mistreat each other. We say, God, just come on down, settle things up. But we better be careful when we call God down, because God may come like in this passage with lightning and fire. Isaiah was a prophet. Sometimes the prophet speaks to the people for God, and sometimes the prophet speaks to God for the people. Sometimes the prophet steps out and says, "Thus saith the Lord," and announces a message from God. Or, in this case, Isaiah is speaking to God on behalf of the people. How long, O Lord, how long? How long must we suffer these indignities? How long must we be put down? How long must we have this difficult life? Sometimes when a prophet speaks for God, his words make sense to him. Sometimes they don't. That's always been encouragement to me as a preacher when people say, "What do you mean by that?" Sometimes the prophet speaks a prophecy that will not come true for generations. Sometimes the prophet speaks a word from God. He has heard a specific word from God. Sometimes the prophet speaks of a vision of God. You know, Ezekiel saw the vision of the dry bones. He looked out and he saw this cemetery full of dry bones, and all the pieces started pulling back together again, and they became an army. And he says, oh, that's a symbol for Israel coming back after it's being scattered. Sometimes, like in the book of Daniel, we get an image that nobody knows what it means, but it's a great image. He saw a great wheel in the sky spinning, and on each one of the spokes were eyes looking back at it. I don't know what he had eaten for lunch that day, but it was something crazy going on in the sky. And he says, you know, that's an image of God. A great mandala of history spinning with God's eyes upon it. Great theologian of the revivalist movement, Charles Finney, says that when the prophets received a word from God or a special vision, that they went into a trance. We don't know that that's true. That was what Finney and many of the early evangelists believed, but it was some kind of transcendental state. It was some kind of raised consciousness above where things were in the world, and they heard and saw different things. Sometimes it was after they had been apart and been through a period of meditation and prayer. That's what Jesus would do. He would pull apart from the disciples and go up on a mountaintop and get away from people and have prayer, and God would speak to him and tell him what to do. Sometimes the prophetic moment is what we call an aha moment. You know, that's when you've been thinking and thinking and thinking about something, and all of a sudden, aha, the light switch is on. You get it. That's what happened to me at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill to pass botany my first semester. The light went on just in time. Made that C, and the light probably went off, but that was okay. Sometimes we've been working and thinking and struggling with something, and all of a sudden we get, oh, so that's what you've been trying to tell me, God. Yeah, now I see it. Sometimes he gets a sign. A sign for Isaiah in this passage is the potter's wheel. Maybe he'd been to the potter's house that day. Maybe he dropped by for a visit. He still had this image in his mind, and here in this great vision he says, oh God, you are the potter and we are the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will, while I am standing vulnerable and still. Potter's house. Been many ministries named for that passage over the years. The potter's house. When I was in Washington, D.C. doing my graduate work at Wesley Seminary, there was a famous Christian coffee house named Potter's House. It was one of the first in the country. And every weeknight they would have serve coffee and goodies and so forth, and different speakers from around town and different churches would come, and they had an open mic, and he would sit on a stool and talk about what they were thinking about, and then there would be open discussion there. That was very avant-garde for 1970s. The Potter's House.